Hello and welcome to Quarantini Day 8. I think I have figured out how to stream live with my fancy camera, so let me know if it looks and sounds okay. Anyway, let's talk about Giovanni's Room, Part 2, Chapter 1. We begin with another flashback, and we learn that in Giovanni's room, where David is now staying, hours and days have no meaning. And it's not necessarily in a good way. Throughout the chapter, there is a building sense of dread. Over time, Giovanni's face, according to David, began to crack. It became a stranger's face. And we also get an allusion to later in the story. We learn that after Giovanni's crime, we don't know what it is yet. He was hiding in a barge on a river, and a fireman tipped off the police. And we also learn that Giovanni lost his job at some point. On top of that, David says Giovanni knew that I was going to leave him, but he did not dare accuse me of for fear of being corroborated. And at last, David tells Giovanni about his girlfriend, Hella. And Giovanni reveals something really interesting about his views towards women. He says they are tempting but treacherous, and they are crazy to think they are equal to men. Yikes. So remember, this is 1956, pretty old-fashioned views. And in Giovanni's room, Giovanni calls Hella silly for leaving David for Spain. And at that point, David snaps. He says, if she were in Paris now, then I would not be in this room with you. But Giovanni doesn't really care about their affair getting exposed. He says, we have not committed any crime, he says. And Giovanni suggests that their affair is not the business of Hella, David's fiancée, at all. They should love and let love. They sleep and later become, quote, furious with the unstated desire to escape the room. And another afternoon, David realizes that he really does love Giovanni as they're joking around, walking to Guillaume's bar. But then a boy, some stranger, walks in between them, and David inadvertently checks him out. And Giovanni catches him doing this and laughs, kind of calls him out on it. But David is ashamed, and he's really worried that he'll start being attracted to men forever. He says, the beast which Giovanni had awakened in me would never go to sleep again. And for that reason, he begins to hate Giovanni. So our discussion question was, what is the symbolic significance of the room in Giovanni's room? And before we get into the discussion itself, I wanted to say that there isn't one right answer. Your interpretation is just as valid as mine or anyone else's out there. So don't hold back, even if you just have a guess or want to get creative with your own answer. And that's what's so amazing and why I love fiction so much, is we can take our own lessons away from it. But what was that room? So Dustin L. emailed me to say something, a really cool interpretation. He said, it might just be the true crime buff in me, but the whole time that Giovanni and David are in the room together, it feels like Giovanni is questioning and pressing David to confess to who he really is and what his feelings are. And I really like that analogy of an interrogation room. Together, isolated in that room, away from society and sexual norms, David is forced to confront the contradictions in his life. Why is Hella in Spain? Why are David and Giovanni really together? What is the real issue with their love for each other? Or, as Gary B told me, the room is a symbol of the interior arena of David's mind and body where those forces meet in combat. But it's also a pretty complicated interrogation room because it's also a site of liberation. Even though David feels trapped there, it's still a safe place to explore his sexuality, as Al C put it in his email. And we see the potential of what the room awakens in David when he and Giovanni are walking around outside. he looks at Giovanni and feels love. He feels real love for Giovanni. But then he sees this attractive man literally walk between them, some stranger, and checks him out. And this concept, this situation horrifies him. Maybe this affair with Giovanni isn't a one-time thing. Even though he knows it'll end, maybe he's destined to keep feeling attracted to men, which he can only equate, because of what society has told him, with dark alleyways and sex without love. And for this reason, he begins to hate Giovanni. And once again, I think we have evidence here that Baldwin, even though he's writing in 1956, doesn't see anything wrong with same-sex love per se. It's David's own insecurities imposed on him by a society that despises same-sex attraction that causes him to begin hating Giovanni. And in other words, it's a missed opportunity, or an example of love that could have been, an example of love squandered. And according to Baldwin, that love can and should still exist. So it's up to us to let it happen. So our assignment for the weekend is Giovanni's Room, Part 2, Chapter 2. And our discussion question is, what is the significance of the sailor in this chapter? It also includes one of my favorite lines in all of literature. See if you can figure out what that line is as a bonus. But don't forget to email your responses to quarantini@ericservini.com. What is the significance of the sailor in this chapter? And since it's another short chapter and people are staying inside this weekend and you have the whole weekend to read it, I actually have a bonus assignment, which this is a book and film club. So the film bonus assignment for the weekend is to watch Screaming Queens, The Riot at Compton's Cafeteria. It was co-directed by Professor Susan Stryker, and it's an Emmy Award-winning documentary. If you haven't heard of it before, it's just an hour long. It's about the very little-known story of the very first known act of collective violent resistance to the oppression of LGBTQ+ Americans. It happened in 1966, 3 whole years before Stonewall, in San Francisco's Tenderloin neighborhood. And so it goes to show that resistance to all the oppression that our community has faced over time started occurring long before the Stonewall riots. And the best part is it's available for free on YouTube. So I stuck a link on my website at quarantini.lgbt. So go check it out. And I will see you on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. But please, please have a great weekend. Stay inside, stay fabulous, do some reading, and I will see you all on Monday. Have a good weekend, y'all.